All right, so we're diving deep today
Yeah.
into some
Yeah.
pretty intense stuff.
Yeah, it is.
You guys send us excerpts from George Friedman's The Next 100 Years, and
Big one.
yeah, this is a big one, and we're going to talk about geopolitics and power shifts and potential conflicts and all kinds of things.
It's exciting.
Yeah, and Friedman's approach is really interesting because he's not like, just kind of gazing into a crystal ball here.
Well,
He's like
very grounded.
Yeah, he's grounded in history and geography and economics to kind of map out where things are going.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about this book is that even though he is kind of looking at the whole world, he is very much focused on America as being at the center of things, at least for the next century.
Okay, so America is the dominant force for the next 100 years.
Yeah, well, at least that's what he argues.
Okay, so the European age is over.
Over?
And now it's America's turn to run the show.
Yeah, kind of.
But this dominance comes with
Yeah.
some interesting side effects. He even compares America to a barbarian culture.
Now, that sounds a little provocative, right?
It does.
But he's not using barbarian in like a negative way.
Right.
He's using it more in the historical sense.
Like the Visigoths.
Yeah, exactly. Like a young, energetic force that's kind of shaking things up.
Not afraid to, kind of.
Throw its weight around a little bit.
Yeah.
And he actually believes that this barbarian phase is important for understanding how America interacts with the rest of the world.
Okay, so America is like the new kid in school,
Yeah.
powerful, ambitious,
A little rough around the edges.
a little rough around the edges,
But full of potential.
full of potential.
Yeah.
All right, but Friedman doesn't just talk about America. He also looks at some like really major global shifts that are happening.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things that he says early on is that the global population explosion is ending.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
We've been hearing about overpopulation forever. It's like
Yeah.
this looming threat. But Friedman's saying, no. That's actually coming to an end.
Okay, so birth rates are dropping everywhere.
Everywhere.
Okay, so even like underdeveloped countries are going to have stable populations.
Well, eventually, yeah, by 2100,
Yeah.
pretty much everyone's going to be at a stable population level.
Okay. And what does that mean? Like, what are the implications of that?
Well, think about the workforce.
Okay.
What happens when you have fewer young people entering the workforce?
Well, I guess you have fewer workers
Exactly.
Really?
And that creates a huge problem for developed countries.
because they need workers
They need workers.
to keep their economies going.
Exactly. So we're talking about a world where countries are actually going to be begging for workers.
Wow.
They might even start paying people to immigrate.
Okay, so it's like a complete flip
180.
from what we see today.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And it's even crazier?
What?
Friedman says that the computer is actually a bigger force in reshaping American culture than this massive population decline.
Yeah. Hold on. How can a piece of technology be more influential than like a basic human trend?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to dig into right now.
Okay.
So Friedman draws this really interesting connection between computer logic
Okay.
and American pragmatism.
Okay.
He says that both of these things prioritize practical solutions over abstract thinking.
Okay.
So it's all about getting things done. It's about finding the most efficient way to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And Friedman argues that this mentality shapes the way Americans approach everything from building relationships to tackling international disputes.
So it's like this deep cultural influence.
It's ingrained.
Okay.
And what's really ironic is that America, which is often seen as this country that's clinging to tradition, might actually be undermining those very traditions by embracing technology and all the social changes that come with it.
It's kind of like a paradox. Okay, so we've talked about America's role on the world stage, and we've touched on these big global shifts, but let's be real. You sent us this book because you knew we were going to geek out over the geopolitical drama,
Oh, absolutely.
right? And Friedman, he does not disappoint.
He delivers.
He delivers on that front. He predicts all these power struggles brewing between Russia and China and Japan and Turkey,
Even Mexico.
even Mexico.
Yeah.
So what's the common thread here? Like, what's driving all of these potential conflicts?
Well, Friedman sees each of these nations as kind of pushing back against American power in their own way.
Okay.
So, for example, you've got Russia.
Okay.
They're trying to regain their former glory,
Right back to the Soviet Union days.
Exactly. They want to be a major player on the world stage again. And that's setting the stage for some serious clashes with the U.S., especially in Eastern Europe and Central Asia.
Okay, so it's not just about one big bad villain taking on America. It's more like this complex web of rivalries and alliances.
It's a multipolar world.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as it used to be.
Yeah. Okay, so what about Japan?
Japan.
They've been relatively quiet for decades.
Yeah, they've been kind of flying under the radar.
So how do they factor into all of this?
Well, Friedman predicts that Japan is going to start flexing its military muscles again.
Really?
Yeah, primarily to protect its interests in East Asia.
Okay, that makes sense, especially with China as a neighbor.
Especially with China, right?
Yeah.
And then you got Turkey.
Turkey.
Always a bit of a wild card.
Yeah.
Friedman sees them capitalizing on all the chaos in the Middle East.
Right.
To become a major power broker in the region.
Okay, so they're kind of like playing both sides.
A little bit, yeah. They're definitely trying to leverage their position.
Okay.
And then there's Mexico.
Mexico.
Yeah, Friedman actually predicts that Mexico is going to become much more assertive in the 21st century.
Wow. Assertive in what way?
Well, he sees their growing population and their booming economy as giving them a lot more leverage. And he doesn't just see them flexing their muscles on the world stage.
Yeah.
He also sees them playing a much bigger role in North America.
Okay, so we've got all of these potential flashpoints, all of these countries kind of jostling for position. But I have a feeling things are going to get even more intense, right?
Oh, yeah. Friedman is known for his bold predictions.
Yeah.
And he doesn't hold back in this book.
Okay, so give me the headline. What's the big one?
But one of his most dramatic forecasts is a major war between the U.S. and a coalition of Japan and Turkey around the year 2050.
Whoa, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
A full-blown war with Japan and Turkey.
That's what he says.
That seems pretty intense.
It is.
Even for Friedman.
Even for Friedman.
What's driving this potential conflict? Like, why would these countries go to war with the U.S.?
It's complicated.
Yeah.
Friedman basically argues that economic rivalries and, political maneuvering, all that stuff, is going to escalate until it just boils over into a military confrontation.
Okay, so it's not just about, like, who have the biggest economy or the most influence anymore.
Right. It's going to be about who controls the most advanced technologies.
And this isn't your, like, World War II style fighting.
Oh, wait.
This is a whole different kind of war.
Totally different. He predicts we're talking space-based weapons, hypersonic aircraft, advanced robotics, all that stuff.
It's like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It is, but it's becoming a reality.
So this war is going to extend beyond land, sea, and air.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to go right into space.
Space is the new battleground.
And Friedman even talks about a Japanese surprise attack on American space infrastructure.
Crippling their ability to wage war.
So even a superpower like the U.S.
Even the U.S.
could be vulnerable in this new era of warfare.
Totally vulnerable.
Okay, so Friedman's painting this pretty intense picture of a potential future war in space.
Pretty intense.
But does he think America can win this war?
He does believe the U.S. would ultimately prevail.
Ultimately.
But it would come at a huge cost. He predicts a devastating conflict that would reshape the entire global order.
So a lot of destruction, a lot of loss.
A lot of loss.
And maybe even new alliances forming in the aftermath.
Definitely a lot of shifting alliances.
Okay, so Friedman's looking at this potential global conflict, but he also dives into another potential flashpoint.
Oh, yeah.
That hits a little closer to home for you and me.
The U.S.-Mexico relationship.
That's the one.
He argues that Mexico is going to become a major player in the 21st century.
A major player? How so?
Well, he sees their growing population and their booming economy as giving them a lot more clout than they have now.
Okay.
And he doesn't just see Mexico flexing its muscles on the world stage. He also predicts a much deeper shift.
Like what?
Like a blurring of the lines between the U.S. and Mexico.
Okay, so not just like increased cooperation or something.
No, something much more fundamental.
He's talking about like a cultural and political merging.
Yeah, particularly along the border regions.
He even suggests that areas we now think of as the American Southwest might become more Mexican over time.
More Mexican culturally and politically.
That's a pretty bold statement considering all the historical baggage and current debates about immigration.
It is.
So does Friedman think this merging of cultures is going to happen peacefully?
That's the million-dollar question, and Friedman
Right.
doesn't really give us a straight answer.
So he's not saying it's going to be all sunshine and roses.
Not exactly.
He acknowledges that there's potential for both cooperation and conflict.
Right. It's this push and pull between those two forces.
Okay, so on the one hand, the U.S. and Mexico could find common ground on things like trade, energy, immigration.
Yeah. They could create a much more integrated and prosperous North America.
But on the other hand,
this blending of cultures and shifting power dynamics is bound to create tension.
maybe even violence.
He doesn't rule it out.
So it's not just about whether the U.S. and Mexico can get along. It's about how these massive changes are going to impact people on both sides of the border.
Absolutely.
Their sense of identity, their way of life.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is.
But it's important to think about.
It is. But let's zoom out for a second.
Okay.
Friedman's not just focused on the U.S. and Mexico.
No, he's looking at the bigger picture.
The global power dynamics.
Exactly. And this is where his prediction about Mexico gets really interesting.
Okay. Amazing.
He sees Mexico's rise as part of a broader trend.
What trend?
The decline of U.S. dominance
Okay.
and the emergence of new centers of power all over the world.
So it's not just about Mexico getting stronger.
It's about the U.S. getting relatively weaker.
Okay, so imagine a world where the U.S. is no longer the only superpower calling the shots.
A multipolar world.
A multipolar world where power is more diffused.
Exactly.
And Mexico, according to Friedman, will be one of the key players in this new world order.
What are the key players?
Okay, so if the U.S. is losing its grip on global power,
Yeah.
what does that mean for the future of conflict?
Well, Friedman definitely doesn't rule out the possibility of future wars.
Okay, so more wars are likely.
Likely, but he doesn't think they'll play out the way they have in the past.
What does he mean by that?
He thinks future wars will be driven by competition for resources, control of key technologies, and ideological clashes.
So not just about territory or political ideology anymore.
No, it's much more complex than that.
And as we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
he sees space as the ultimate battleground in these future wars,
The ultimate battleground.
where whoever controls space controls the world.
Exactly.
A pretty bleak picture.
It is.
But Friedman also offers a glimmer of hope.
A glimmer of hope.
He argues that human ingenuity and technological innovation have the potential to solve some of the world's biggest problems.
He's not all doom and gloom.
So it's not just about weapons and warfare.
No.
He's talking about finding new ways to address climate change, energy scarcity, even poverty and disease.
He sees technology as a double-edged sword,
Okay.
capable of both destruction and progress.
So it's up to us to decide how we use it.
Exactly. He challenges us to use our ingenuity to harness the power of technology for good,
To create a future where technology serves humanity.
not the other way around.
Okay, so Friedman is basically giving us a choice.
A choice.
We can either succumb to fear and let technology be used for destructive purposes.
Or we can embrace its potential to build a better world. It's a powerful message.
It is.
And it's a reminder that the future isn't set in stone.
Right.
We have a role to play in shaping it.
Through the choices we make, the actions, we take the values we prioritize.
Exactly.
So it's not just about predicting what will happen.
It's about thinking about what could happen.
And working towards the future we want to see.
Exactly.
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Friedman doesn't exactly give us a simple answer.
Yeah.
He's not saying it'll be easy or that it'll all be, kumbaya and holding hands.
Right. There's going to be some bumps along the way.
He sees potential for both cooperation and conflict.
A real push and pull
Right.
between those two forces.
So he suggests that the U.S. and Mexico could find common ground
Oh, yeah.
on a lot of things, actually,
Trade, energy, immigration,
Yeah.
you name it.
and create this much more integrated and prosperous North America.
A win-win for everybody.
Right. But at the same time,
Right.
he's not naive about the challenges.
Wow.
He predicts that this blending of cultures
Mm-hmm.
and this shifting of power dynamics,
Yeah.
it's going to create some tension
Inevitably.
and probably even some conflict,
Probably.
both within each country
Yeah.
and between them.
Right. It's not going to be a smooth ride.
So it's not just about whether the U.S. and Mexico can get along.
No, it's bigger than that.
It's about how these massive changes are going to impact people on both sides of the border.
Their sense of identity, their way of life.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
It is.
But let's zoom out for a second here.
Okay.
Friedman isn't just laser-focused on the U.S. and Mexico.
He's got a wider lens.
He's looking at global power dynamics.
The whole chessboard.
Right, and this is where his prediction about Mexico gets really interesting.
How so?
Well, he sees Mexico's rise as part of a much broader trend.
Okay.
The decline of U.S. dominance and the emergence of these new centers of power around the world.
So it's not just about one country replacing another.
Right, it's more like a diffusion of power.
A multipolar world.
A multipolar world, exactly.
Where power is more spread out.
And Mexico, according to Friedman, will be one of the key players in this new world order.
One to watch.
Okay, so if the U.S. is losing its grip on global power, what does that mean for the future of conflict?
That's the big question.
Are we going to see more wars, or will the world find new ways to resolve disputes?
Well, Friedman doesn't rule out the possibility of future wars.
Okay, so more wars are still on the table.
They're on the table, but he thinks they'll be different from the wars of the past.
Different how?
He thinks they'll be driven by competition for resources,
Okay.
control of key technologies, and ideological clashes.
So not just about territory or political ideology anymore.
It's more complex than that.
And of course, he sees space as the ultimate battleground,
The final frontier.
where whoever controls space controls the world.
It's a high-stakes game.
It is. It's a pretty bleak picture.
It can be. But Friedman also offers us a glimmer of hope.
Okay, I'm listening.
He argues that human ingenuity and technological innovation have the potential to solve some of the world's biggest problems.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
No, not at all.
He's not just talking about weapons and warfare.
No, he's thinking bigger.
He's talking about finding new ways to address climate change, energy scarcity.
Poverty, disease, all big challenges.
So he sees technology as a double-edged sword.
A powerful tool that can be used for good or evil.
And it's up to us to decide which path we take.
We have the power to shape our own future.
So Friedman is leaving us with a choice.
A choice.
We can either give in to fear and let technology be used for destructive purposes.
Or we can embrace its potential to build a better world.
It's a powerful message.
It is.
And it's a reminder that the future isn't set in stone.
We have a say in how it unfolds.
We have a role to play in shaping it.
Through our decisions, our actions, our values.
It's not just about predicting what will happen.
It's about imagining what could happen.
And working towards the future we want to see.
Exactly.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into George Friedman's The Next 100 Years.
A lot of ground.
We've talked about American dominance, the rise of new powers, the potential for conflict, and the transformative power of technology.
It's been a wild ride.
It has been. It's a lot to digest, but hopefully this deep dive has sparked some new ideas.
Some food for thought.
And inspired you to think differently about the world around you.
To engage with the big questions.
Because the future is out there waiting to be written.
And we all have a hand in shaping it.